Of the Argyle ISD Board of Trustees. At this time, we will determine if a quorum is present.
Leona McDade, present.
Josh Westrom, present.
Rich McDowell, present.
Leanne Artho, present.
Matt Slayton, present.
Craig Hawksworth, present.
I, Sam Slayton, present. We do have a quorum established. The time is still 5 p.m. We will adjourn to executive session. All right, good evening. The time is 6 p.m. We have returned from executive session. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Oxford.
I can read up here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor of the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. So proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Herron, for that. We appreciate it. All right, Mr. Hawksworth, you want to lead us in prayer?
Sure. Dear Lord, thank you for all you do for us each and every day. Thank you for being with our students and our staff and our community in these first few days of school, watching over them and keeping them safe. Please be with us as board members and administrators of this district to do what's in the best interest of the kids in this district and guide them each and every day. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, we have one community member signed up to speak this evening. I'm going to go ahead and read my paragraph and then we will get started. All right, we're now moving into the public forum portion of tonight's meeting. Please note that board policy requires speaker to sign up in person before the meeting is called to order. During this portion of the meeting, board members will listen to comments, but as the designated spokesperson, only the president may respond to the speaker if needed and refer to concerns to the appropriate administrator. Speakers can comment on agenda items, but trustees will not be able to discuss the items until they are before the board during the meeting. Board Policy BED Local provides the presiding officer the ability to adjust the time allotted per speaker for effective meeting management. Pursuant to that policy, an individual's comments to the board at tonight's meeting shall not exceed 5 minutes. The presiding officer may reduce the allotted time for each individual to speak to no less than 1 minute for effective meeting management. Speakers are not allowed to receive time from other individuals. Tonight, each speaker will receive 5 minutes. Specific complaints about individual district personnel are to be processed through the district's grievance policies as set out in district policies DBA, F&G, and/or GF. Speakers are not permitted to refer to individual students or employees by name during the public comment period. Additionally, if you have a pending grievance that may come before the board in a level 3 hearing, please refrain from addressing the topic of your grievance except through the grievance process. All right. All right, Mr. Sterling. Good evening. And Mr. Matthew Slayton will let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Okay, cool, thanks. Thanks for letting me come here tonight. First of all, I've had the opportunity to meet with a couple of board members, and I just want to say thank you guys for the opportunity for me to be able to reach out and you accept that invitation. And actually, one of you actually extended an invitation to me, so I thank you for that. And it was awesome. So anybody that's listening to this or watches the recording, if you haven't reached out to your board members, I recommend that you do so because they are willing to listen. And it's been, we've had some good conversations. So anyways, just want to say thanks for that. I know as we're getting closer into planning for future, not closer to, you are planning for future. I know that one agenda item that I spoke on a couple months ago was when the middle school moves and it gets split to 2 middle schools. I know that the idea is to, apparently the idea is to move 7th and 8th grade into high school with the high school. I have a kid that's probably will not be zoned for that school, and I just want to say that even though I don't have a student that would go to that school, I just want to ask that you guys please consider something different. I just don't think I have a 12-year-old daughter with an 18-year-old boy in the same school is a good idea. Again, that wouldn't be my daughter, but if we were to move or something like that, it could be. So again, I just want to bring that up. So that also makes me want to ask, is this the only solution? Is it the best solution? I know it's been done in the past. Argyle was a lot smaller. I just don't want it to be something that, because something we've always done, it may not work this time. So I just want it to be something that's considered. And again, If it's been considered, you guys have mapped all this out, and that is the best plan, that's great. I love that, and I'm for that. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm still not for that. But I love the idea that it's been mapped out and that it is the best solution. So again, is it the best solution? And then with no stats to support what I'm about to say, I do think from a community standpoint, and maybe it's just me, I do think that if this is the best solution, and with anything that's decided upon as to what the solution is, the final solution, if the community could get this is what happens if we go this way, this is what happens if we go another way, and this is why we chose this direction. I also think that'll help with any bonding that's going to be needed in the future. I think people want to see, okay, there was 2 solutions, there was 3 solutions, and this is why we chose the solution that we chose. So if that would be a possibility to see something like that, I think that would be a big help in support of a bond, because it would show that, hey, we understand there was 2 options, but this is why we chose this way. So anyways, I just had those few comments to make. Again, I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and love the opportunity to be able to meet with those that I've met with. So thanks again.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our public comment portion of tonight's meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve action items discussed in closed session.
So moved.
Mr. Matthew Slayton, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Sorry, Mrs. Leanne Arthos, second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, it's time for some recognitions.
We do. All right, we have first and foremost tonight, because it was hot off the press. In fact, if you remember in May when we had the spring, the kind of the winter and spring recognition board meeting night, we were on stage when we got word that we had won the UIL state championship. So they were at competition and did not get to be a part of that night. So we want to make sure we bring them in front of you as a board. We get pictures. We give them the appropriate celebration that they deserve. So Mrs. Good, I believe you're here to kick this off. So come on up and share with us this exciting news, and then we'll want you to introduce your teams and your coaches.
Thank you. Yeah, we couldn't make that one.
I know.
Right? We couldn't make it.
It's just a little early.
And we still don't have representatives, like not every kid's
Sure.
able to be here because they're on college already,
Yeah.
or some of them are at band practice right now as we
Yes.
speak. So, but I wanted to give you all a few numbers if y'all didn't
Yeah,
know. So
absolutely.
we took 34 students to compete, and out of those 34 students, 33 of them either got individual placements or they placed as part of a team. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal, right?
Yes.
We scored 210 points overall as a school. The next school, I think, was 137 points as academics. We had a few firsts, though. We're Argyle, right? But we still keep getting some firsts, which is amazing at this point. Current events, coached by Mr. Woody, we have our first current events first place team this year. And let's see, I think 2 or 3 of those kids actually are returning. So
Nice.
that's awesome. And that team score was the highest team score in the state in all divisions as well. So that was phenomenal. We also had a first in, not first overall, but first in Argyle history. Caroline Deffenbaugh, she graduated already, but she had the highest calculator score we have ever seen as a district with 329. That was phenomenal. She actually got second highest score in the state in all divisions as well. So that was phenomenal. So our first place teams, not all coaches are able to be here. We do have Coach Perkins, who coaches the mathematics, calculator applications, and number sense. I don't know if you want to, no? And then Miss Hadley was going to try and make it. I know she wasn't, Mr. Woody wasn't able to. We've had a few coaches kind of switch around a little bit after some have left and everything, but we have all teams represented still. Our independent study classes are still going. We're hoping to come back strong still again. Our first place teams this year, we had accounting, calculator, current events, and lit crit were all our first place. Second place team, science, and our third place team, we had 2 of them, social studies and spelling vocab. And so we have representatives from a couple of those. Would you like me to call them off? Let me go to this one. So for calculator, we have Zach Fritz and Abhi Tadavarti.
Y'all come on out.
I know.
Come on up.
Come on. 2 of our other students, they graduated. So Okay. For accounting, y'all are not counting? Oh, we don't have our accounting people here, dang. Okay, well, we had accounting as well, first place. Current events, none of them are here either. Man. And Lit Crit was supposed to try and get here. They did not. Oh, no. Oh, I don't have a certificate, but let me go ahead and call the other two students. Drew Makarith and Arush Singh, they were on our spelling team that got third place. And Riley Pizzana, she's a sophomore who was on our science team last year as a sophomore already. And second place science. So we're lucky that these students are returning, so they're going to make us that much stronger, and if we can just keep them going through the years. So appreciate it. Let's get, you want to hold that for overall.
Turn around and face the other way. Congratulations, guys. Thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next up we have Chief Davis here for an exciting moment to swear in our newest member of the Argyle ISD Police Department.
Yes,
Officer
very,
Kyle Barton.
very excited. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be tough to beat that, Officer Barton. It's going to be tough to beat that right there. A calculator. What is that? Calculator?
Number sense, calculator,
Unbelievable.
current events, spelling.
His district just
Lit
continues to
crit.
blow me away. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Well, this is one of my favorite nights of the year because we get an opportunity to add to our family. And our family is very close to us obviously, and the district as well. This is Officer Kyle Barton. Now, I'm going to go down I don't have much time, but I could stay here for an hour talking about the stuff that Kyle's done in his career and the amount of experience that he's bringing to our district. But we'll try to just touch on a couple things. Officer Barton, 32 plus years in law enforcement, 32 plus years, all in Haltom City. So he's seen a thing or two. He has over 3,000 hours of professional development and law enforcement training hours. Okay, so the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement requires that we do 40 hours a year to maintain our license. You start doing the math, and he's up around 100 every single year. That's also only the amount of hours that has been reported to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. I'd probably say we're probably going to add another 30 or 40% on top of that 3,000 hours is probably a more realistic number there. So highly impressive. He has his Master Peace Officer certificate. He has experience as an officer, also in a supervisory capacity, which is fantastic to have on our team. He's been on patrol. He's been a sergeant on patrol. He's done criminal investigations. He's been a sergeant for criminal investigations. He's done internal affairs. He's done law enforcement grant writing, which we are absolutely going to utilize him for at this district. Going to be great. And I can go on and on and on, various things that Kyle, or that Officer Barton here, has done at Haltom City and in law enforcement. Ultimately, though, the most important thing out of all of this is that he's an unbelievable human being behind the badge. And we take great pride in our department. We understand that people are our greatest assets. And Kyle Barton adds to that piece. So we are so excited to have him. Couple other things, big sports guy. In fact, he's a 2-time Golden Gloves boxing champion. He's hoping to bring some of that, maybe a club or something at the 6th grade center. Stand by for that. But in 1981, he won the high school middleweight division Golden Gloves award champion. And where was that, Officer Barton? Where was that in high school?
Fort Worth region.
Fort Worth region. And then in 1987, he went 6 years later, he ended up winning the light heavyweight regionals here in Texas as well. Officer Barton is joined here tonight by his wife, Shan. Where's, oh, there she is. Shan. Come on.
Come on up.
It's a family here. And he also has a daughter named Allison that currently lives in Austin. We are thrilled to welcome him to the district where he has made a home at the 6th grade center. He is going to be a shining light for years to come in our district. For years to come, we're excited to have him. So without further ado, let's get the oath going. How about that?
Sounds good.
Let's head over here. Now this is the tough part. This is the tough part, Officer Barton. We'll have you stand there, please. We'll go nice and slow. All right. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Excellent. And then repeat after me. I, and state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Kyle Barton, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the duties
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of an Argyle ISD police officer in Denton County, Texas.
of an Argyle ISD police officer in Denton County, Texas.
I will, to the best of my ability,
I will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States
the Constitution and laws of the United States
and the state of Texas.
and the state of Texas.
I further pledge to create a safe and inclusive school community
I further pledge to create a safe, inclusive school community
where learning can thrive
where learning can thrive
through proactive engagement, partnership, and accountability.
through proactive engagement, partnership, and accountability.
That's the tough one.
That's a tough one.
I will strive to protect and empower our students and staff.
I will strive to protect and empower our students and staff.
I will faithfully enforce the laws of the state of Texas
I will faithfully enforce the laws of the state of Texas
while always upholding the rights
while always upholding the rights,
and freedoms of individuals, so help me God.
while upholding the rights and freedoms of individuals, so help me God.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Congratulations.
sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just the family. So stand up here so I don't photo bomb it.
Now that he understands miles per gallon.
All right, Liz. Liz, you ready?
That's a pretty good dad right there.
It's your meeting tonight, Liz. Let's go.
Okay,
We're ready.
thank you. Okay, I feel like we've talked about this budget for many more months than we have on others leading up to it, so I'm
That's
sorry,
not a
but
feeling,
some
that's
of
a
this is a
fact.
repeat, most of it is, of everything we've talked about for months, but I feel like it's important to mention it one more time before you actually act on it. So we're gonna open the public hearing now, and go through the proposed budget and tax rate. So a little bit over the timeline, we had our first board workshop in February, and we had workshops many months along the way. During that timeline, we also developed a district financial strategy team that we met weekly and had ongoing discussions trying to identify strategies and revenue streams for the district moving forward. Just a little bit of a reminder of how we've got here. You know, we're 42nd in funding and per pupil state public education funding. It's $4,000 per student behind the national average, so that's quite a bit of money. So we haven't changed our revenue since 2019, and when you look at some historical trends here in a minute, you're going to say, well, wait a second, you said you weren't changing our revenue, but our budget grows every year. Yes, it's a per student, so as we're growing, our revenue increases on the per student, but that per student amount has not changed since 2019. The state had a record surplus. We started talking about some issues coming up. We've known that we were going to hit a financial crunch for several years. We've mentioned this along the way. We've talked about it. We've discussed it. We had a lot of hope going into last legislative session, and there was no action for school funding out of that. There was some tax relief in there for our taxpayers, which was a good thing, but there was no relief for the school funding crisis. They've started talking about the upcoming legislative session, and the first indicators that we are hearing is that they are not going to discuss public school funding. They're going to talk about vouchers again. So we are not hopeful going into this legislative session. I think our hope kind of died with that last one and all 4 special sessions that happened without any type of action for school districts. I just want to point out again, it's a record surplus that they had, that they still have. The state's appropriated over $4 billion for public education and can't agree on how to disperse it, so it's still sitting with the state. That's before we even get to the next legislative session. All right, so when we started this process, we looked at what our general fund revenue would be if we did nothing, if we just continued operating as is. And you'll see we kind of hit a little plateau there. What would happen with our general fund expenses if we kept operating as we did normally and we funded the staff the same way, did our expenses the same way, all of our budgets the same way? And you'll see that kept increasing. And so we were looking at about a $4.6 million deficit, or an 8%, which is a significant amount of our budget. And so that's why we started acting and looking at efficiencies and revenue streams. So just kind of a recap. Along the way, we did quite a few things, and we had a lot of difficult conversations. They weren't all, none of them were easy, none of them were fun. And I wouldn't say we would have been having a lot of those conversations if we weren't in the financial crisis that we were in. There's a lot of cuts that happened that we would love to add back, even in the same way they were or in some new way that would benefit our district and our students. But with the financial crisis the state has put us in, this is where we are. So we looked at about $683,000 in non-personnel, about $2.3 million in personnel, and just a reminder that a school district budget is about 80% personnel. I think we're sitting at just at 81% going into next year. We had some reductions from this year, and then we looked at some additional revenue streams, about $712,000. Most of that was adding some pre-K sections, which when we have the room in our elementaries, adding pre-K sections is really great for our students, bring them in early. That does come with a cost, and we were able to offset that cost with the revenue tuition for those. After we got to that point, we started talking about compensation plan, because as we started out looking at that large of a deficit, we got in front of our staff and we were just honest and said, hey, if this is where we are, we can't do anything for compensation next year. So we felt like we had gotten down to a good enough point that we could start looking at some sort of compensation package. And we talked to you all about this quite a bit. Mr. Daniel brought it to you back in June. Dr. Daniel. I'm going to try and remember that.
He's gonna get that a lot.
Yes, he is.
Can you get a new plate?
We're working on it.
Sorry, Liz.
That's okay.
I was just waiting for the first one. You won.
I'm it. So sorry, Dr. Daniel. I'll get that right. Sorry, back on track here. So
Completely off.
all right. So in June, a compensation plan out of fund balance is a one-time payment. It was $1,000 professionals, 500 paraprofessionals, and auxiliary paid in 2 payments, October and March. You also increased the insurance for health insurance by $50 a month. And then bus driver hourly adjustments to try and get competitive with area districts, because we were severely short-staffed in our bus drivers and we're having a hard time getting students to and from school. I will tell you, as the start of school, we look to be fully staffed, if not almost, right there, fully staffed with bus drivers. We're starting the school year really well there, so I want to thank you for that. It has helped with retention there and helped with hiring. And then you also are approving a potential 2% pay increase on a midpoint scale with the passage of a VADER, a successful VADER election. So if you do approve a tax rate for a VADER and the taxpayers do approve that, then this 2% pay increase would go into effect. And that would be an annual ongoing recurring cost.
And just for historical perspective, I mean, every year I've been on the board, which hasn't been many, we've managed to work in a raise for the teachers in the 3% range, if I think.
We have. And
within
Dr.
budget.
Daniel.
And within
Within
Yeah.
budget.
And, you know, I guess we did go into deficit, but we managed to balance it at the end, if I remember
did.
correctly. But
We didn't.
she did.
Right,
Yeah, well.
administration did.
That's true. But I just want that from this year. I don't know how long it's been since y'all probably haven't been able to get raises, but
We actually talked about that internally a little bit today. The most knowledge I have is back through 2012 when I got here. Dr. Daniel may have a little more knowledge than I do on this because he's been here a little bit longer. I can tell you since then, there was 1 year we had a 1% raise. That was back in some tight financial times as well. But the majority of those years were a 3% raise. That is typically what we've done in the past is 3%. And so to be able to come out and just say a one-time payment, that's a lot different than what it's looked like in the past for our staff members. This board has been really dedicated to providing for our staff members and providing competitive pay and trying to retain teachers and retain all of our staff. And so this does look different. You are right.
and I don't want to discount the fact that in addition to not being able to give these teachers and staff the raises that they deserve and need with the rising costs, because they're experiencing the same rising cost in insurance and property tax, whatever, you just name it, it's all going up, grocery bills and stuff. I mean, we've also had to cut people, maybe even in support roles. So it's a double whammy. And so you have those things going on. And then the third thing is you just have a morale issue going on here where you have this war on public ed going on it's been politicized. And, as much as I've been paying attention to politics, I mean, teachers used to be kind of off limits, and now they're being politicized. And public education has become this national platform talking point of, bad things are happening in public schools, and they're creating, gender neutral bathrooms and doing all these woke things they say. And so it's become, I just think overall, more so than ever, we need to show staff and teachers how much we support them and value them, and this community values this public education system here. How blessed we are to have a Argyle ISD. Not every community has an Argyle ISD.
I would agree with you. It's, my children went through this district, similar to y'all's children going through this district, and I can tell you the teachers they had along the way, all the support they had along the way, it was amazing educational opportunities. And I hope that we can continue to provide that for all of our students. But you're right, teachers are leaving in droves. We have been very fortunate to be able to retain teachers and to be able to hire teachers. Dr. Daniel's department has done a great job in that area, but pay does matter.
And so do the support roles. And like he was saying, we did have to absorb some of those support roles as we were looking through different things, and we want to rebuild those. I mean, obviously, we want to rebuild those support roles so that they can have not only compensation, but additional support.
That's correct.
And I think just reiterating this, if we adopt the tax rate for the Vader and the community supports the Vader, this 2% base increase is ongoing. It's going to be, you've factored it into the budget moving forward. It's not something that's going to be taken away from teachers. And it's, as the state gave discounts on property taxes that, people see that on the home side, but that hurts us funding side. So now we have less as a school district in regards to budgeting. And so our legislators are putting it on school districts to say, if you have the ability to raise the amount of pennies, then that's where you need to go get your funding, because we're not interested in funding public ed right now.
Well, they're really putting it on the taxpayers.
Right. But they're putting the burden on us to ask the
Taxpayers paid in and
taxpayers.
created a $32 billion surplus, but yet we haven't taking all our pennies, so
Right.
Yeah.
we don't get any of that.
Right.
Go get your
And-
pennies first.
And if we were at the average for students, what we were given for students, we had $4,000 more, that'd be over $24 million more into our budget. And what's our total budget, Liz?
It's on a slide here in a minute, but say 58
55.
million. I think it's 58 million.
We have a $58 million budget, and if we were just the national average, we'd have $24 million more dollars that would funded into public ed, being able to offer more for our kids. So
And y'all have heard me say this, and I'll say it again because maybe somebody's watching and they may. I mean, really, what you're hearing at the state level, and they are, and there's a lot to be bragging about, that they have a $34 billion surplus last legislative session, and I think they're projecting another surplus this legislative session. But they can brag about having a surplus because the state is not paying its bills. And one of the bills that the state has, one of the constitutional obligations that it has, is to fund a free public education system. And so they brag at the state level, we are managing this state so well, we have a surplus and we're going to give you an $18 billion tax refund. And we all saw it and experienced it. But the reality of it is they have it because they don't pay the bills. I would have a bigger surplus personally if I didn't pay my bills. Okay? And so I want people to really understand what's going on here. It's really just, unfortunately, politics, and you need to understand why they have surpluses. Because we're 4,000 a kid under average funding. Yeah, we have a surplus.
That creates a large surplus.
Yes.
It does.
Well, and just, to add to that, the House Public Ed, they met last Monday, the 12th. And in that meeting, it was reported that by our own Commissioner of Education, that the state of education, during which he reported an annual funding is $14,928 per student. Okay, so he's reporting $14,000 per student. But what they're not mentioning is that most of the figure that he gave over that $6,000 basic allotment is in grants and different things not related to classroom or school district funding, including Wyndham Schools, Regional Ed Service Centers, state and federal vendors, TRS pass-through, dollars generated to repay bonded debt through INS, billions in federal ESSER dollars, and federal free and lunch funding. So they're putting all these numbers, they're padding that to say, oh yes, Texas, you get $14,000, $900 per student. And that's because they're putting all this other stuff. It's not touching the classroom.
That's correct. I believe they also included INS in that.
They did.
Which is, we all know that doesn't pay the bills day to day. That doesn't keep our schools open. It doesn't pay our teachers. That is for building buildings or renovations, things like that. So yes, their $14,000 number that they put out there is very skewed. And if you don't read the fine print of what's included, you're looking at going, why is everybody, saying we don't have enough money to educate our students? Well, again, it's the data that they're putting out there, and they're putting it out there for a message that benefits the voucher debate right now.
Well, prime example is Officer, Barton, who was just swore in here, and I'm glad we have great officers do that. But the state will tell you, we gave schools more money because we passed a school safety bill that said, hey, go hire more police officers, and you each get $15,000 a campus. And they say, see, so we gave all public school campuses $15,000, and they count that towards the revenue. We gave you more money. But they also imposed, Officer Barton ain't doing that for $15,000.
That's right.
So they imposed a cost. Yeah. They imposed a cost on us that's far greater than the revenue.
We spend 367% of our state allotment in this district on safety and security.
So,
What is it now, $10 a student?
I think so.
If you remember, that press release was $10 a student. It did not say, oh, we only upped it less than 10
28
cents.
cents.
Yeah,
28
something like that, because they were already paying $9 and something a student. All right, so moving forward into tax rate information, and we're going to talk about this again later in the meeting, but voter approved tax rate election. This is just about the only option districts have left moving through this public funding crisis. And this is by design by the state. Districts have up to 17 pennies that each district can add on to their M&O rate. The first 5, I believe, can be without voter approval, just by board and district action. And then anything after that takes voter approval. back in 2012, we found ourselves in a similar situation. And at that point in time, we did at that point in time, it was called a TRE, not a VATRE. It's the same thing, just different terminology. But we did one for 10 pennies. And at that point in time, it was because that was what was needed to fully function as a school district. We didn't feel like we needed the full 17 pennies at that point in time. So we did 10 pennies. The voters were great and approved that, and we have operated on that ever since. In 2019, when they redid the school funding formula, and it was the last time that the legislature increased the student basic allotment, those pennies were compressed, and that was taken from 10 pennies down to 9.3. And so we've had the 9.3 since 2019 moving forward. So that leaves us 7.7 pennies available to go back and ask the voters for to fund our schools. That would raise around, give us about $2.5 million to go towards the general fund. So from that, we would go back and do the one-time payment that you've already authorized, because if you remember, that's all going to be out of fund balance, so that would help repay that. It'd be a 2% midpoint pay increase that would be ongoing every year thereafter. It would help offset the remaining deficit budget for this year, and we're going to also help maintain classroom ratios in future years. And I do have a slide later on that brings us back up with the amounts for each one when we get to that section. So that is what the Vader funds would be used for. Again, many districts have gone through this. Some went through it back when we did in 2012. Some did partial pennies like we did. Some did the full 17 pennies. I've had some questions recently about how many districts in the states have done this, how many pennies do they have, and I don't have that information. I haven't found a database yet. I'll have, try and get that as soon as I can. But we've gone through the headlines, and we've looked at everybody that's done it around us. So Louisville had one last year. I believe Northwest, Grapevine, Colleyville, Coppell,
Frisco.
they've all called one again for this year.
Or tonight.
Or will today. I believe Denton's talking about possibly looking at one for the next year. Austin AISD, they are looking at calling one as well. There's many districts across the state that either did one last year or are looking at doing one this year, and it's all because we're all in the same boat. There's a public school funding crisis in Texas. And so this is one of the very few options that can actually generate funds without, we talked about limited open enrollment, right? Opening the doors and bringing in additional students. Well, you do have costs with that. You've got teachers and all of those types of things that go with that. This you don't have the offsetting costs with. So it's one of the very few options left to districts, and we're all having to act on that.
And if there are districts that are not having to do this, they are using one-time solutions. For example, they're declining enrollment, so they're selling buildings, they're consolidating campuses, they're selling off land. They're able to continue doing that without this option yet, but when they run out of those one-time solutions, they'll be in the same position.
Right.
Well, not all districts have their pennies, do they?
No.
Not all of them
Some
still
of them,
have
some
them.
of them don't have the
Right.
choice because they don't
Right.
have their
But
pennies.
some of them that still have them are
Yeah.
using some other one-time solutions right
But
now.
I think one of the points is some of the reasons you don't hear that all districts are doing it is because they've already
taken 'em.
maxed out, and you've managed to run this district to this point with 7 less pennies than we're authorized to go ask for.
I would like to say we've managed, because that starts from the board down,
Yeah, I understand.
and all of administration and all of our campuses and all of our staff members.
Yeah,
So-
and as far as budgets goes, we've taken kind of a double hit from legislation because of the formula transition grant,
That's correct.
where the funding cliff that was there. So we're one of 81 districts in the state of Texas that have a formula transition grant that they created, and we're now having to deal with those repercussions as well. So, and it was our experience as a board of meeting with our legislators, they were vastly unaware of what the formula transition grant even was, and not really open to making changes to a system that doesn't benefit the whole state. So, but we're one of 81 districts in the state that are having to deal with this, and it penalizes us even more so than what our legislators have done with their inaction.
That is correct.
Another way to say that is there are a lot of districts here that you've listed or that are going out for a Vader, that are going out for a tax increase because their funding is flat, and they're not able to balance their budget because funding's been flat since 2019.
That's correct.
And then there's districts like us that it's not flat. It went down because our formula transition grant expired and we lost hundreds of dollars. It's hard to move. It's a grant, it's a formula, so it could be $300 or $700
Right.
per kid. And so we're one of those very unique, unfortunate districts because we relied on grant funding that expired, that we lost money. We wish we were flat.
That they were supposed to even out at the end of the 5 years, and they did not.
Yeah, they were supposed to replace it.
Right.
Right.
And that's out of what, 1,100 districts roughly in the state? So
Yes, ma'am.
we're a small minority that really hasn't been paid attention to.
And that's correct. Which is, once it's gone, that's gone. It's kind of why I've said I feel like we need to move on to just the basic allotment. We're right there with everybody else. Let's focus on the basic allotment increase and see if we can gain some traction there. I think it's going to be a very tough battle. Again, I'm going to say every indication so far is public school funding is not out for discussion right now. It's all about vouchers, and you can call it anything else you want to call it. It's a voucher, and that's what the focus is on.
But don't lose sight of the fact that if they raise the allotment $300 or $500 per kid, that may be great for a lot of school districts, or better for a lot of school districts. But for us, that's just replacing what we lost.
That's correct.
That brings us back to
Even.
2019.
Yeah.
2019 funding levels, and you still have the expenses that go along with the 24-25 school year.
And nothing that high was really being considered per student.
No, I mean,
No, nothing that high.
No.
the only bills that passed the Senate had a $50 increase, and the one bill that made it to the floor in the House had a $500 increase, but it never got a vote.
Right.
Okay, kind of a history of taxable assessed values. I showed this in our last meeting, but we did not have our certified values at that point in time, so I've added that on the 24-25 year in red, our actual certified values. This kind of just gives you an idea of, we get certified estimates in April, the end of April, and then we know those come down a little bit before we get the values in July, around July 25th. But you can see the drastic growth in values there. It matches with our student enrollment growth. We are growing all around. All right, our tax rate. Our tax rate's a little different. It's been going down. We did a little more history on that, a little digging. So back in somewhere around 2005 is when the majority of districts in the state were at $1.50 on the M&O side. That's not your total tax rate. That was the M&O side was $1.50. There was a lawsuit against the school funding formula and all of that, and it was decided. So they worked towards some compression. And so it took them a couple of years, and they got everybody down to the dollar. You could go to $1.04 locally, and eventually to $1.05, and then you had so many pennies you could vote on. And so in that time frame, we went down to the $1.04. We did the election in 2012. Added the 10 pennies, so we were at $1.10 for many years, and then in 2019 we started compressing again by the legislative rules. So when you look at our total tax rate, they're proposed for this year at 24-25 of $1.2869. Just to remind you that several years ago, M&O for a majority of people was at $1.50 just on the M&O side. So this is a drastic difference if you go back and start looking at the early 2000s, late 1990s. So we go down. We had a large rate decrease last year. It was over 18 pennies on the M&O side. And then we're looking at this year bringing back 7.7 of those pennies. And if you're trying to do the math in your head, it's not going to add up perfectly because we would have had a little bit of compression this year. If we did nothing, it would be a compression of 0.23 pennies, so not even a half of a penny, but there's a little bit of compression there. So if you're saying, well, why doesn't that add up exactly? That's why. There's always some reason it doesn't add up exactly when you're talking about the figures that the state's making you put out there.
When I'm looking at this chart, if with the proposed tax rate, Vader, you're saying our total tax rate would go to 1.28, right?
Correct, 1.2869.
Which would be lower than it was in 2022.
That is correct.
And lower than 2021 and lower than 2020.
That's correct.
So essentially, without a Vader, we were going to be keeping it similar with a little bit more compression.
Very similar, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But in fairness, the reason people's values have gone up on their
Right.
houses. So 1.28 may feel a little bit more painful than 1.41 than in 2020.
That's correct. So when we're talking about this, we're only talking about the rate, because we only control the rate as far as what we can set. The appraisal district is charged by law with actually assessing the value of the home or the property or whatever it may be. So we don't control that, but we all know that those have risen drastically in some cases over the years. And so we are charged with actually setting the rate on that.
And what goes to, what is paid in taxes doesn't all come back to the district. The
That-
more that is collected, the less the state puts in.
That's correct. When, say all things remain equal, you weren't looking at a VADR, you weren't looking at anything, same tax rate. That's correct. If we go back and look at this, our values raised almost $700 million, okay? If we weren't looking at anything else, we would collect locally more, quite a bit more on that. But the state would give us quite a bit less because we're funding on a per student. And so it doesn't matter what you're collecting locally as far as your total funding. It matters what the state says that you can have per student, and then what balances that out, either local or state. So the more you collect locally, the less the state gives you. It is a balance on there. So if you are not involved in this conversation or looking at it day to day, and you get that property tax bill and you're going, man, that's gone up so much, why are there so many issues? That the school has a ton of money. Well, they're paying more, but the state's giving us less because they're paying more.
So, I mean, there's another way of saying that. See, if you looked at all the school tax everybody was paying in the district, and you added it all up, and you said, this is what everybody's paying that lives in Argyle ISD, and they're sending that to the state, we're getting less than that back.
Yes, so I'm gonna use some low, easy numbers, right? Say that we collected, on the property value we had out there, we collected $10 million in taxes last year, and the state gave us $5 million for $15 million. Say we had the same number of students, because remember, it's just per student, but our values go up, so we collect $12 million this year, then the state would only give us $3 million. You're still stuck at that per student ratio. So local taxpayers are paying more, the state gives us less. Depending on, and every district's different depending on where you're at and how much is funded locally and how much is funded on the state.
This is how they create, one of the ways they create a surplus.
That is exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
So they force us to raise the taxes, so we're not using all our pennies.
Right.
So we're not gonna give you any more money. We raise them, then they give us less, they get to keep the difference,
Correct.
surplus that they, again, refuse to give back to us.
That's true.
So I think we should all just stop paying our property tax.
It's just unbelievable. I
I'm
mean,
willing to go if you'll do it. You go first.
there's been nothing that's just blown my mind more
There's Marlo.
since I've gotten the opportunity to serve, to understand public school finance. It'll blow your mind how poor the state is at funding its obligation.
46.
And how there is,
Well,
when
we're
you
the
talked
ninth
about
largest
attack
economy, and we're
And probably
46th
the
in,
strongest public school system.
right, and we're
Right.
46th in the nation.
yes. And if you were talking about that attack on public education earlier, I think some of this is done intentionally to make it hard to understand, because then there's a feeling of the taxpayer that, you're being lied to, the school's not telling you the truth, right? Because why would it be that way?
They sow distrust in it because they're touting to their folks out there is, no, we compressed the taxes, your taxes
Right.
are lower. We did what we said we were gonna do.
Right.
And then at the expense of schools, because within the last 5 years, we've gone from a $25,000 homestead exemption to a $100,000 homestead exemption. So everybody touts, oh, we gave you more money, but that was at the expense of public education.
Right. It is a great thing for taxpayers, right? Going from that 25,000 to 100,000, it is great. And there needs to be taxpayer relief, but we just wish the state would actually show that relief in their funding formula to the public school districts.
100% agree.
Yes. All right, so just a reminder that we do build a budget, because again, it's a per student funding, and it's in attendance and not enrollment. We are, again, one of 8 states left in the nation that fund on attendance and not enrollment. So regardless of how many students are enrolled, it's how often they show up and how many days they're here is what we actually get paid on. So we use the spring demographic report. We use between a 95 and 96% attendance rate. And so we're estimating 5502 on ADA. We also use historical trends on special populations. And then we look at things like, did we offer more CTE sections than we have in the past? We may bump those amounts up just based on what we're doing differently than just the trend shows. So everything is shown, estimated revenues are dependent on estimated ADA.
Well, I'm gonna
But
say
again,
it again. Say it again.
Yeah, again, to hammer down on this, you have to set a budget based on enrollment.
On your expenditure
On
side,
how we
correct.
staff.
Yes,
Correct.
Based on enrollment, we get paid by attendance.
that's correct.
So for you to accurately set a budget, it's guessing. You don't know how many people are gonna show up.
Right.
You
Or
can
how often they're
guess,
coming to
you
school.
can
Right.
estimate.
We use trend data, and I'm going to tell you, having COVID and our recent 5-year trends has really hurt our estimates on our attendance, because that was a drastic change. You have pre-COVID attendance, you have the COVID years that were really low, and then you have the post-COVID. You know, when you compare us to other schools, we are still sitting pretty strong with an attendance rate, but it's still not what it was pre-COVID. And so you're right, when we're trying to guess at what it may be for next year, there's very little trend data that we can use to try and estimate that, just because of the history, the recent history and what it's been.
For us, it's
So.
great.
All right, so where does this leave us?
We've already
So-
said.
Yep. We've said this a few times. So this budget is at just under a $1.3 million deficit. And if you look down at the bottom on the operating months of fund balance, we're estimating what that would do on our fund balance, 2.4 months worth of operating fund balance.
And just to remind everybody, we go back, the 1.29 has in there the one-time payment
That's correct.
stipend in there, and the 2%.
Does not have
Does
the
not have
2% in there.
2%. It's it's just the one
Right.
time, and then the original.
800, almost 900,000 of that.
Yes,
Correct.
that's the one-time payment.
Is one time.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
budget that's being presented does not have the revenue from the Vader, and it does not have the
Okay.
expense
I
of
wanted
the
to make
2%
sure we were
on
clear
there.
on that.
I've talked with our auditor and several other people on how to proceed at this point in time, and since that still is a vote, you know, if you approve it tonight,
Okay.
it's still a vote in November, and so they said that, you know, this is the recommended way to move forward at this point in time,
Okay.
and do not count the revenue or expense in there,
Can you-
and amend it later.
Can you just explain, just for people that may not understand, me being maybe one of them, fund balance? It's just, I mean, it's your savings account, right? I mean, is that right? I mean,
It's similar, yes.
Required by law to maintain.
Yes, equity, you know, if you were looking at a business, it'd be the equity in the business, right?
Yeah.
It's, you have to, well, you don't have to have anything, right? But the recommended and what we're graded on, there's a couple of different things. There's 2 months worth is the minimum. As a district, we've tried to keep 3. We're, you know, probably lower on that end than a lot of districts. A lot of districts have higher fund balance than that. Let's just be honest. I feel like we've done great to maintain around 3 months. And sometimes we've jumped up a little bit more, and sometimes we're just right at 3 months. We're dropping down below that right now. So as you see our budget grow, right, we have more students, we have more expensive, it grows every single year. And you're doing a percentage basis. If you wanted to maintain, if you had a $55 million budget and you needed 25% of that, right, for fund balance, that dollar amount is not the same when you move to the next year and you have a $58 million budget and you need 25% of that. Your fund balance needs to be growing in dollars to maintain that percentage, or to maintain that 3 months operating fund, okay? We are taking from that fund balance right now, so we're dropping down a little bit, at a little bit higher rate than what we would be if even if we were just at a 0, we would not be maintaining that 3 months. We need to be putting money into fund balance to maintain a 3-month operating
So
fund balance.
next year, our budget's gonna increase because we're expecting growth, right?
That's correct.
But our fund balance is decreasing, so what you're trying, you gotta get that fund balance back to
Right.
where it needs to be, because it affects our rating.
It affects our rating. It also
borrowing.
affects, you know, it can affect your cash on hand and your cash flow, right? Your fund balance doesn't necessarily equal your cash flow dollar for dollar, but you gotta do some cash flow estimates, right? So we don't get paid in 12 equal payments. We don't have sales that we do every month. We don't have different things. If you look at when you pay your tax bill, right? Most people pay that late December or in January. That's when the majority of our funds come in. We get paid by the state, not in 12-month payments. They pay a little bit more in September to us because they know, you know, you have a pay cycle with them. They know that when our money comes in is December and January. So you get some in September. You get some money in December, you get some money in January, and I don't mean all of it, you get a little bit here and there, but your large infusions of money, and then you get some more in August from the state. So you do have to have some cash in the bank to maintain and be able to pay your bills and to be able to pay your payroll throughout the time, because your money is not coming in set 12 equal payments throughout the time. So you do have to have some cash flow. or you could have some issues there of not being able to,
Like a line of credit. You got.
correct. So, all right, we also, so we're gonna break this down in a few different slides, just some different ways to look at it. Gives you a history of the general fund revenue, broken down in a few ways. Everyone wants to look at property taxes. We have some other local revenue, state revenue, and then federal revenue, which in the general fund, the federal revenue is very, very minor in that. So I started with 18-19 and kind of gave you a history going through. The 23-24, I just want to remind you, where it's at the amended budget. It is not at the final. It's where we're at this day and time, and then what we got for the proposed budget. So on the revenue side, going from $54.6 million to $57 million. On the general fund expense, we're going to look at it two different ways. This way, it's broken down by what type of expense. You've got payroll, you've got contracted services, supplies, and different things like that. So you can kind of see where that's growing in each category. And again, you've got some history there. So on this, you're going from 55.8 to 58.3 between the 2 years. And then we also look at it by fund, by function, because how you actually adopt the budget is by fund and function. And so these are the functions lined out in the general fund, and I gave you a little bit of history in that as well. Instruction, of course, is always our largest fund. And you can kind of see the trends there and what's growing. To kind of give you an idea, instruction is going to be where all of your teachers are, your supplies for the classroom. Media services is going to be the library. Staff development is any development and professional development for our educators. Instructional leadership is kind of on our curriculum and instruction team. School leadership is going to be the campus offices and their admin teams. You've got your counseling services, health services, our nurses, student transportation, all of our bus drivers, all of our fuel, all of our fleet insurance. Student nutrition is really housed in a separate fund. Extracurricular is anything from athletics to band to UL academics, all of our co-curricular activities. Then you've got the general administration, which is the majority of our office here. Plant maintenance is going to be grounds, it's going to be buildings, HVACs, all of those type of things. Your utilities are included in there. Security and monitoring houses, the majority of that is going to be our police department. Data processing, it's all of our technology, all of our PEMS data that has to run through there. Facilities and acquisition and construction, sometimes we have some funds in there and sometimes we don't. It depends on what's happening that year. We're not projecting anything for next year. We don't have any large projects out of the general fund. Contract instruction between schools, that is our recapture payment. That's money that's going back to the state. You'll see the history there, a little bit of trend on that. And then payments for shared services. Y'all remember we used to be in a cooperative for special education services, so you'll see I think in 2021 we had a large dollar amount there and it's dropped off to just a little bit since then. And then 99 is intergovernmental charge. That's really where we pay for our appraisal district charges. And so all of that adds up, and that's here in a minute. When we get to actually acting on the budget, you'll have a sheet with fund and function on it, and that's what you're actually adopting. All right, interest and sinking fund. We're looking at maintaining our tax rate at 50 cents. We're looking at that going to $29.5 million. That includes the projection of the bond that we just priced, I believe, on either the 12th or 13th for our remaining issue of 2022 bonds. And then your student nutrition fund, and that's a balanced budget there. I think I had 1.8 million even on last month, and we actually did a little bit deeper dive on that. And so that changed a little bit at 1.8513 million, but it is estimated for equal revenue and equal expenditure there. Our student nutrition fund does a great job, that department, in maintaining and not having to have the general fund support them. You don't get that at every district, and I think they do an awesome job. They provide a great service, a great product at a reasonable price, and they're able to self-sufficiently run their fund. And that is my last slide for the public hearing part. Do y'all have any questions on that? Nothing I covered that I didn't cover in enough detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of this will come back up in a little bit on the action items.
I'm sure it will. All right, well then we'll close our public hearing.
Okay.
Thank y'all very much.
All right, thank you, Liz. Okay, we'll move to the consent items. August 2024 donations. We have JLBB Company LLC, amount of $3,852.78 for landscaping materials installation at Eagle Stadium. ABC donation number 40, $1,500 for all sports graphics for social media content provider. Total August donations $5,352.78. Does anyone have any questions on any of the consent items presented? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Western, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a second from Mr. McDowell. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
All right, it's the birthday boy. Mr. Cohen's birthday. Everybody say happy birthday, Mr. Cohen. Happy birthday.
Should we sing?
We already sang to him today. He was able to get that experience earlier.
It's not on the agenda, so let's stick to the
Sorry, you have to
agenda.
stick to the.
Get to spend it at a board meeting.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. So I don't have a lot for you tonight, short report, but didn't want to not be up here and give you a little bit of information where we're at. I know we all know it, but we had a successful opening of our newest elementary school campus last week. So we still have contractors out there. We are just completing some minor work, some things that wasn't quite done, nothing that's, inspectable, because we did get all our finals and our certificate of occupancies. Working on punch list items still. That list is down to very few items. And then of course, as students and staff are in the building, we're discovering things that need warranty service within the 1 year period, which is most things are covered for a year. Some are extended, but so we've run into some HVAC issues already on the new campus, but they've got that, I think, in a pretty good spot, and I think we've got everything as of today working out there as it should. But we're going to continue to monitor that and work on these minor things till we get them done. On the new middle school, so grading permit is ready to be released. That came through, I think, Friday before last. Only requirement was the pre-con meeting that we've got to have with the town, so that is scheduled now, and it will happen Thursday. So after that meeting, we will have a grading permit in hand, so we can start work out there. Grading only, no utilities. We're still in the process of having that set reviewed, addressing comments when they come back. So they're finalizing those to go in this week, and that will be the third review. So we're addressing the second round of comments to resubmit for their third review.
And help me understand, is that normal that you would go through 3 reviews?
It's probably not abnormal. It's certainly very frustrating that there's that many reviews. It's not like you get a list on the first review that never changes other than things come off as you address them, because each time you submit, new things get added to the next list. So it's kind of like moving the finish line on you.
Yeah.
When do you finally
Moving
get
the
close
goalpost,
enough
yeah.
to get there? So it can be very frustrating.
And I guess then there's also, it's not just that there's 3 reviews, it's 3 reviews that are kind of not, that are spaced out over a very long period of time.
Correct.
Like you're not getting these reviews are not very efficient.
Correct. They usually take, I would say 3 weeks is probably fairly average, 3 working weeks for it to be reviewed. And then depending on the depth, the detail required in the responses, that could sometimes also take a week or 2, even longer in some cases, to be able to address those comments. And there's nothing anywhere out there that says we will only do 3 reviews or something like that. So you don't really know when you're going to get to the end. They'll tell you what they want, but they aren't required to tell you what you have to provide in order to meet what they need to see.
When you say they, you're talking about the cities.
The cities. I mean, in this case, we're talking Argyle on this project, Flowermont on the next, but this is the same for all jurisdictions in Texas.
But every site, you have to have a grading permit. I mean, you have to, right? I mean,
Yes.
You have to. This is the same stuff you have to do all the time: final plat, building permits, grading permits, all that stuff, right?
Yes.
And in fact, we did that in JRE.
Yes.
Did we not? I mean,
We did.
We graded that site, we had to have a final plat, and we had to have a permit, right?
That's correct.
And we got it done in all like 12 months.
Just about, a little over.
And if I'm not mistaken, we're sitting here about,
18 months.
yeah, I mean, but I mean, from starting.
These reviews, not counting site plan approval, let's take that out, not count that. We submitted in March our first set of plans for review, which would be for grading and/or utilities. So here we are in August, just now getting released on that work.
When does it become a challenge for when we're trying to open?
Now,
Yesterday.
It's,
No.
oh, when are we in jeopardy?
Yeah.
I think we're fine on this as long as we get there, you know, and being that we're about to be on the third review of the next permit we need, I feel like we'll be fine because we've probably got at least a couple of months worth of grading. But once that's in hand, you get areas graded, you start behind it rather than doing all the grading and then coming back and starting. We like to overlap. That's how we keep the schedules rolling. So it's not in a danger zone yet, but it's not very far it would be. So currently we're trying to get them to say, okay, you can submit your building plans for review. That's another department, another set of reviews. And the response thus far has been, no, it's too early. We're not going to accept that to start those reviews. Because there'll be several reviews on that as well.
is this town personnel or are they farming it out?
It's all farmed out.
But
It's all
guided
third
by
parties.
town?
Hmm?
But guided by the town personnel or?
It goes through the town and then they distribute it. So they have a third-party engineer that actually does the reviews. And then on the building side, they have a third-party company, Safe Built, that does those reviews for them.
And when reviews are basically, hey, here's your plans, and then they make a few comments, and you address those comments, and then send it back to them, and they say, check.
Correct.
And so what you're saying is we submit the plans, they redline them, you get them back, you address them all, or the ones you can, and you send it back to them. And then they add a few more,
Yes, that's right.
and then they send it back to you, and then you address them, and then you did it, and then they said, okay, good, you did all those, and then they add a few more, and now that's how we're on a third.
Correct.
And you would just prefer that they would look at it and go, here's what you need to do.
It would be preferred.
Well, then that's my question, is like, why isn't that stuff just all written out in a checklist format or something so that you know before you hand it in the first time that you've covered?
Well, it is and it isn't. So a good example would be with the grading permit. We have to show that we're not going to have any impacts to any properties downstream with stormwater. You know, so we don't want to cause flooding anywhere downstream. But how you demonstrate to the town that you have not affected that is what they don't tell you. So you have to demonstrate that, but they don't say, I want a flood study. You know, on some projects, we do our detention pond, we give them the calculations, they go, oh, okay, this looks good. Other projects, they'll look at it and they say, well, we want a flood study. Well, we have to go hire another engineer and wait, 4 weeks, 8 weeks while he does all of his engineering things to come up with his report so that we can submit that to the town, which they also review and make comments on.
But there was a flood study done on that land.
We haven't done a flood study.
But why
There's an overall flood study. They make sure that our piece of it fits in with that overall piece that they have. Cardinal Strategies happens to be the one that reviews the study we did. So it can be very frustrating. But this Thursday, we should have a grading permit. And we will discuss at that meeting our building permit, and hopefully we can get permission to get that process started now before we're able and ready to be going vertical. So similar on the stadium, going through reviews with the town. I actually found out this morning that our development comments came back Friday. So we are now working to submit for the fourth time once we address these comments in Flower Mound. We did get to take care of the final plat. It's already been approved and filed with the county. And at least in this case, Flower Mound has allowed us already to submit the building plans. So we're submitting for 5 different permits. Each building is required to have its own permit in Flower Mound. So it's actually 5 separate reviews. And we're working on finalizing that for the 4th review. So we'll be ready for building long before we need it here. And we're trying to get the same thing accomplished in Argyle, so it's just ready and continuous. So we keep fighting the machine.
I got it. Thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
My turn?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We've had a lot going on the last couple of weeks. It has been, as we started the Amazing Race, an amazing start to the new year. Excellence, expectations, energy, all-time high. We had convocation on August 7th, where we had our entire district staff in the arena over at the high school. We were blessed to hear from one of our very own Silver Eagles. We had retired U.S. Army Command Sergeant Major Gretchen Evans. She actually lives in Harvest. She's an Argyle ISD resident, and we are so honored to have connected with her. She was our keynote and did a fantastic job. We've had more staff reach out to us about how impactful she was to them as a group, as a team. She's a true champion for Argyle, our teachers and our students, and she also was recently honored as a Purple Heart recipient. So if you don't know her story, I encourage you to learn more and connect with her, because she is all in Argyle, and so we are very excited to have connected with her. And even though school just started last Wednesday, we have had lots of Eagles hard at work. Ms. Knowles, you can attest to that. It's been a busy start over at the high school with your coaches and directors and kids. Volleyball has they opened and won their home opener against 6A Northwest High School, went to Pearland, won second in the entire Pearland tournament, facing a slate of competitive volleyball programs. Tennis had 2 big wins and has already started district play with a record of 9-1. Our girls cross country varsity finished second. JV took first at the Cowtown Challenge. We had theater, had troop day in Coppell, and is honored as a gold level troop for the 23-24 school year. And then football will host their scrimmage this Friday against Melissa. And of course, if you are around here in the mornings, you hear the marching band every morning preparing for their season. So lots of excitement going on, lots of kids involved. It's great to see that. Talk a little bit about enrollment. In a memo sent on Friday to parents from the district, we shared our opening day was 5,973 students. We have already seen remarkable growth with 472 more students joining us since the last day of school in May. We topped 6,000 students on day 2, and as of today, we are at 6,034 students. We did open additional tuition paid pre-K classrooms this summer because we had such an interest there, and those are part of those enrollment numbers as well. But I wanted to be clear on that. As far as campus specifics, our demographer has done a really good job doing our projections this year. He is very spot on for everything. JRE is the one that we're off on. Remember, his projections are for snapshot, which is October, and we have already exceeded our snapshot dates as far as a district. But as far as campuses, he's within 5 to 25 students at every campus except JRE. We're just under at Hilltop. We're at 738 today. JRE, we're at 808. South, we're at 768. West is 631. 6th grade center, 483. Middle school, 955. And the high school, 1,651 for a total of 6,034. So right now, the high school, the middle school, and JRE are above their already predicted numbers for October. As our email said on Friday, we do have 168 approved temporary transfers enrolled. These are families, just to be clear, with executed contracts on homes already in Argyle ISD. We actually have already closed temporary transfers in all pre-K sections across the district. We've closed temporary transfers at JRE, at all grade levels in Hilltop, and then in kinder, 1st and 5th at West, and in 2nd grade at South. So we're watching that daily to make sure we still have room for those that are moving in. Their homes are ready. So we continue to monitor that. Just a reminder to parents, I know there were some questions about recess. We are in August in Texas. It's extreme heat time. And there are some required heat policies that we do have to deal with as far as ozones and recess. And so your campuses should be communicating that. They have requirements for orange and red days, and sometimes it goes red before a certain grade level gets to go outside. So there are some constraints there that they have. But if you have questions on recess, please reach out to your campus. They have all of that taken care of. Their nurses are monitoring that by the hour. But I also want to take a moment to publicly congratulate one of our very own. You heard it a little bit a few moments ago. But Deputy Superintendent Chris Daniel, Dr. Daniel now, has been in the doctoral program at DBU over the past few years, and he successfully defended his dissertation last Thursday. So we're very, very proud of you, Dr. Daniel. That is a huge hill to climb. And so we're very proud of you and so glad you're part of our team. So just wanted to share that. And then finally, just a few community engagement updates. Homecoming's early this year, so if you're thinking October for homecoming, it's not. It is actually the week of Labor Day week. So Friday, September 6th is our homecoming game. And we will have the parade on September 4th, which is Wednesday. So stay tuned for more information from the campuses and the district on that. We also have launched, or in the process of launching, a volunteer website. Our principals and assistant principals asked that we have something standardized. I believe Mr. Heron is going to bring it up here. We're going to have this on our website that will actually go through for those wanting to volunteer, some how to do that, the requirements, expectations, and also confidentiality, because that becomes a concern sometimes on campuses with our principals and APs. So be on the lookout for that site to launch, and it'll have a lot of information for those wanting to volunteer. We have incredible volunteers in this district, and we certainly want to make sure we're consistent in our efforts. We will also soon be launching our second group of Eagle Ambassadors, and we've collaborated with other districts this summer and have made some adjustments to our process. So be on the lookout for more information there. And we're also going to be sending out a community committee interest form. We have a lot of people in this community that are constantly saying, how can I be involved? How can I serve? And so we are launching that website. It'll be a dedicated web page allowing community to express interest in serving on various committees, and these could be district or campus. You'll be allowed to sign up on a district interest form, but that does not guarantee membership. All that's doing is saying, I'm interested, this is my experience, this is where I think I can help and serve, and then our district administration will plug in community members that are willing to serve. So that website has all the information about our committees and can help you decide whether or not that's a good fit for you. And then finally, just legislative advocacy. It's ramping up again, and it's going to be more important than ever. Ms. Stewart just did a whole public hearing on why we need to come forward and have a call to action again. We're in the process of developing a district-branded legislative advocacy video, and we're going to relaunch Take Action Argyle campaign. Just a couple things I want to note. Our governor and lieutenant governor have released the first step instructions to the state agencies. And these issuances of instructions are just the first step in a long process for the state to develop their budget. But what I'll tell you is none of the instructions coming out from them includes public school funding as agenda items, and she referenced that a few minutes ago. So we're at a gridlock completely with appropriately funding public ed. And the Legislative Budget Board just did Moat Casey did a recent analysis of the budget board. The inflation adjusted state and local funding per ADA is currently projected to drop by nearly $1,460 per student compared to what schools received in fiscal year 2020, the first year of House Bill 3. So our call to action is big. So please be on the lookout for all of that. We're going to need your help, and we're going to need your energy at the state level because it's going to take all of us as a community to do that campaign. So,
Dr. Carpenter, can you clarify on temporary transfers over the last 5 years?
Yes.
We've had over 1,100
Yes.
students that were temporary transfers.
Yes, so Ms. McGarvey oversees that process in our office, and so she had looked at those numbers late last week. We've been accepting temporary transfers in this district since 2019, over 1,100 of them at that point, just on that record. Last year, we did not take them for pre-K through 5 because we were so tight at the elementaries. But we did 6 through 12, and then we opened back up the elementaries this year with the opening of the 4th campus. So that's been the data over the last 5 years.
So it's nothing new.
Nothing new, and it's not open enrollment.
Right.
These are already our families; they're just not in their homes yet.
Thank you for clarifying.
You mentioned a couple things that you touched on. One, and I think Liz glanced over this. It's shocking to me that public school finance is not even being really mentioned when there's $4 billion that the state has put in a savings account 2 years ago and said that this needs to go to public ed, and it's sitting in a savings account, and they will not release it.
Hopefully high yield.
They will not release it because, frankly, the governor and the lieutenant governor and other leaders are saying, unless you give us vouchers, you can't have that $4 billion. They are holding public school hostage funding.
So
it's sitting there.
Yes, and in their letter, I have their letter that they individually sent out. Legislative appropriation requests should take into consideration that priorities for the next Appropriations Act will include property tax relief, additional funding to support construction and modernization of dispatchable electric generating facilities, operational funding for the mental health facilities authorized by the 88th legislature, and fundings for ESAs, vouchers, and securing the border.
ESA, yeah, which is vouchers,
Right.
education savings accounts. So anyway,
So that was the direction given, which is part of our video.
And aren't they proposing a higher per student amount for these vouchers for parents than what,
10,000.
than what we're getting for per student funding?
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, that's where I think we are. If they would just make it equal,
Yeah,
I think we
They
can,
would give
we
us
can
10,000
finally,
a
we
student.
may not agree, but it would at least
but
make a
listen,
lot of progress.
but listen, I mean, I'm telling you.
I know
I know,
what
but
you're gonna
here's
say.
what they're gonna say.
I already know. what
Is
you're
you're gonna say, hey, I'll take 10,000 a kid. And they go, well, we're giving you 15.
1480.
You know, that's,
So,
and you go,
okay,
no, you're
so
not
I'll
giving.
tell you what then, we'll just not be public ed anymore, we'll go private, and we'll take the 10.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's the game. But on a positive note, great job on the Silver Eagles program and finding Gretchen Evans. And I mean, she was fantastic, and she said a couple things that resonated with me in terms of facing the storm
Yes.
and build your rope teams
And love your problems.
and love your problems.
She said, "Love your
I have to remind
problems."
myself of that.
But she did, and every day's a start. Every day we choose to be at the starting line, and every day we choose to face the challenges that we're going to embark upon. And she did. I mean, I had staff members in this district that have been here many, many years say that it's the best thing they've ever heard.
It was fantastic.
I received nothing but positive feedback. The energy was great. Mr. Heron, you and your team did
Yeah.
a phenomenal job.
Dr. Jordan and
Dr.
Learner
Jordan.
Services team, they have great ideas. And
So
Did we mention the bash? I mean, that, by the way, the bash was
Eagle Bash,
was
yes.
fantastic.
We got so far past that starting school.
Yeah.
Yes, we had probably almost 2,000 families at Eagle Bash.
And that was a big increase from the year before.
Yeah, lots
I
of
thought we had
families from
a
out of
lot the
state.
First year.
So yes, another great event was the Eagle Bash. And we love seeing our Eagle partners and all of our community vendors there. It's just, it's phenomenal. So,
thank you.
yes, thank you. All right, I think, Ms. Stewart, I think you're back up for the next 4 items. We have, you're right, we have talked about most of them.
Can we get you like a really high stool? so you can
Yeah.
chair?
Might need a seat up here as long as I'm gonna be. All right, so the first of the items is the final budget amendment for the 23-24 fiscal year. So we talked about this last month. We've done well, not all of our end of year, but estimates. What we've done is as many as we can at this point. And so the amendment does not change the bottom line. It does increase and decrease some revenue items, and the same on some functional expenditures. The largest change that I'm going to show, that I would say, is going to be on is that wrong now? Sorry, it's on that where you were at. If you look back there. Yes, just scroll down, or if I can't change it. There we go. On the tax revenue. So you'll see a pretty large decrease there in estimated tax revenue. You'll see a complete zeroing out of prior year taxes. So due to some changes this year, if y'all remember, we talked about we had a pretty large tax rate decrease over this past year. We also had the change that was voted in last November of going from 40,000 homestead to 100,000 homestead. So a lot of our estimates were based on some original numbers, and as we've gone through the year, we've realized, that we need to make adjustments based on the new changes and updates. And then the prior year taxes, we keep seeing refund after refund after refund. A lot of that had to do with some change in the over 65 frozen values. When the homestead exemption went from 25,000 to 40,000, that did not include that category, and so they've gone back and caught those up. As well as some other changes that were made in those laws. And so we've actually are seeing zero, and it'll probably be negative in that category for this year. And that's not different from a lot of schools across the state. It's a statewide issue, but that was a little different than what we'd seen in the past. And then we've made our end of year estimate in our state funding there that offsets some of that property tax there decrease. We've increased some on the foundation school program. And then expenditures, very minimal change there as far as the amendment goes. It's But I will say that we will come in better than this. When I'm looking at each one of those functions at this point in time in the year, there is quite a bit left in each one of those. And a lot of our staff members are to credit for that. At one point, early back in January, February, we said, hey, things are not looking great moving forward. We need to really look at the year we're in, and we stopped a lot of our, not things that we had to have, but the things that we would like to have. And they took a hard look at their budgets, and they really made some changes, and some different things have happened in different areas. And so we're going to see some savings in that when we finalize our books at year end. And so just because you see a $1.2 million deficit here does not mean that's how we're going to end up. We will end up better than that. Couple of areas to note. Maintenance and operation has the largest amount left in that, but of course we've got utilities and HVAC. If y'all know, we've had a lot of HVAC issues this year, so we have a lot of outstanding issues there that will come in before 8/31. So that we were looking, I think that'll end up about a $250,000 savings there in that function, and that is our largest one when you look at function by function. But if you were to look at it today, it would show almost double that. But again, we still have a full month of utilities, and it's our largest month in electricity and all that. So those are the main parts of this budget amendment. Again, it doesn't change. The amendment doesn't change the bottom line, but we will end up better than this when we finalize our books. Any questions?
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the final fiscal year 2024 budget amendment.
So moved.
Dr. McDade, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Artho, second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Okay, so this one is a lovely one that we have to do every single year because we are considered a wealthy district. It has to be an action item every year, and the motion has to be read if we want it to be considered by TEA to be approved. So this is, again, it's because we're considered a wealthy district. We do the purchase of attendance credits from the state. Many years ago when we were, every district, when they're finally if they're made a wealthy district, they're notified by the state. You had to choose, option 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The majority of districts choose 3. That's where we're at. That hasn't changed from when years and years ago we first became a Chapter 41 district, which I believe is actually Chapter 49 now, but most of you recognize Chapter 41. And so this is just formalizing the process. TEA notifies us every summer, and we have to go through this process every single year and renew this. So if you could scroll down just a little bit further. There we go. There is your motion that, again, I would ask if you so choose that we use this language for the motion as recommended by TEA.
Okay. I'm gonna entertain a motion to consider approval for the agreement for purchase of attendance credit option 3 agreement and to delegate contractual authority to the superintendent. Entertain a motion.
Want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Mr. Hawksworth.
I move for the 2024-2025 school year, we delegate contractual authority to obligate the school district under Texas Education Code TEC 11.151C4 to the superintendent solely for the purpose of obligating the district under TEC 48.257 and TEC Chapter 49, subchapters A and D, and the rules adopted by the Commissioner of Education as authorized under TEC 49.006. This includes approval of the agreement for the purchase of attendance credit, netting Chapter 48 funding.
Right, Mr. Hawksworth, motion to approve. Second.
Second, whatever that means.
Mr. Western, would you like to read the second?
No.
Or we good?
This is just.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Right.
All right, thank you. Yes, we acknowledge that's an oxymoron.
Yes,
We're a wealthy
sorry.
district
Thank
with
you
a
for going through that
deficit
process
budget.
for us.
Yes.
Yes, so we are back now to actually taking action on the adopted budget, or on the proposed budget. Pull this page back up. There is you can ask any questions that you want to, or if you have any more discussion on this that you would like. I also have another page that we've got linked, another slide linked in there that has just the one page that we'd actually be voting on. It's in the agenda. Yes, sir. There, the second one. Sorry.
When you were building the budget for this year and you were looking at JRE, has it changed since you started formulating versus when we opened, like the difference between what you projected in May versus how we opened?
As far as the number of students that were there, yes.
And-
But as far as the expenses, you're talking in terms of, no, we were still estimating the same amount in property insurance, the same amount in utilities, the same amount in the campus budget, those type of things. So that estimate part hasn't changed. Now, what we have had to do, and Dr. Daniel's department has had to work on this, and I know Dr. Jordan has had to work on this as well. They've had to look at, do we have teachers that were on one campus where we didn't have enough enrollment for, and move over to JRE to cover that.
Right.
But as far as the overall budget, no, it did not change.
And that's why things like that, I mean, you can't do those until the year of before because number one, you're trying to look and see what your enrollment's gonna be, but number two, you may be you're going to shuffle people around.
Right.
And you aren't gonna know that until it's the year of that you're preparing to open.
And you didn't have to hire all new people at that campus.
Right.
We just moved people within.
Right. We had some new FTEs we brought
Right.
to you, but it was
Right.
not like just duplicating a whole new campus.
Right.
So in anytime you go to open a campus, you have a base staffing guideline that you look at. And then on our end, we're gonna estimate that, okay, so if we're looking at the demographer's number for the future, that for that campus, you may have so many new students, but you're also moving some students from other campuses. So there was relief seen a lot at West, right? So you don't need near as many teachers that you did at West that you did the year before. So we're estimating just a percentage amount of staffing that would move over, and then you have an overall percentage that we're estimating as new staff. So we do work that into campus openings.
And we're using the 22-to-1 ratio,
Right.
because 5 years ago, you could use 18-to-1 or 20-to-1, but, with the rising cost of utilities and insurance and all of that, the budget money's gone to that. It's not gone to keeping our ratios at 18 and 19 and 20.
And a couple of other things to note, just some key percentages here. When we're talking about that record inflation that we've seen since 2019, and we're still sitting at that same funding formula, for utilities, in just one of our utility areas, we've seen over a 50% increase in the rate, in the electrical rate on some of our campuses. For property insurance, property casual fleet, all of that, 20% increase in 1 year, over 300% since 2019. Now granted, are we adding some buildings in there? Yes, we are, but that's not the entire increase. The increase is drastic in property insurance when you look at that. If you look at our staffing, you just look at the amount that we pay, you have to pay more to keep up. Just as you mentioned earlier, our staff members feel that pain at the grocery store. They feel that pain everywhere they go in all of their bills. So in 2019, a starting teacher was $53,000. In 2024, it's $59,500. That's a 12% increase. So that's not as drastic as the other two that I just said, but that's still an increase when you're looking at the same funding formula as 2019, but you're in 2024 and $25. Mm-hmm. So just some areas to point out there and what districts, and we're not alone, all districts are facing.
Well, and health insurance costs too.
Right.
Yes, health insurance has
Fuel.
gone up quite a bit.
You're paying more for less health insurance.
You sure are.
Didn't they also increase deductibles? Or not for us yet?
Yes. Our insurance deductibles.
Insurance deductibles?
Okay.
Yes.
So we're paying more but getting less,
Yes.
essentially,
Yes.
coverage. Yeah,
All right. Any other questions on this?
not unlike my house.
Yeah. So officially, this is the general fund, the student nutrition fund, the debt service fund, which we also call the INS fund, and then our technology one-to-one fund, which is a small fund that does need to have its own adoption.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Liz? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve action item 11C, approval of the 2024-2025 budget adoption.
Motion to approve.
All right, Mr. Westrum, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm gonna give that to Mr. Matthew Slayton with a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Let's close.
Okay. Next item, because we do these in order, you have to adopt your budget first before you address your tax rate. So next on the agenda is the tax rate. This is a resolution of the board to set the tax rate, and it's for in tax rate terms, this would be the 2024 tax rate. Even though we're in fiscal year 24-25, we still call it the 24 tax rate. So this does include the 7.7 pennies for the Vader. That would set this tax rate at 1.2869 total. It's 0.7869 for M&O and 0.50 cents for INS. Couple of things to note in here. One, you'll notice that this rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operations, and last year's rate is in bigger font than the other, and it is capitalized, and that's required by law. The next part, the tax rate will effectively be raised by 0.5% and will raise taxes for maintenance operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $77. So, if you wanted to look at and do some comparison, where did you get the 0.5% from? There was a new House bill that went into effect for 2024 of how to calculate that percent, and that percent is the no new revenue M&O rate, and the new law says that the no new revenue M&O rate is the same as the M&O rate to maintain, which it has not been in the past. So when we're looking at calculations, it actually comes out to 0.5%. And that M&O rate to maintain is actually found in our notice that was advertised in for this meeting. It's a calculation that we're provided guidance on how to get to. So just to clarify that before any questions come up of how in the world do you say that's 0.5%, it's a calculation required by law, and we have to put it in there. And there is a specific motion that, again, if the board so chooses to move forward with this tax rate, that I would ask you to read and use the following language. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of 1.2869, which is effectively a 0.5% increase in the tax rate.
And Liz, the last time you've made this recommendation to increase the tax was when?
2012.
Okay.
We have either maintained or decreased our M&O tax rate since then.
And the reason, as I understand, I mean, when I got on the board in May of 2022, you were kind of forecasting that, we have a potential funding cliff if this last legislative session that went through, if there was no new funding or no increase in funding, and they didn't extend or replace the formula transition grant, that the only option really for this district to replace what it would be losing would be asking for this tax increase.
That's correct.
You didn't, you were saying, you were hopeful at the time, we're not gonna have to do this because I'm really optimistic, and we were talking to our local legislators. They are gonna get more funding. They have $4 billion sitting in a savings account. They're gonna release that money to you, and they're gonna extend or replace the formula transition grant, which is about $3 million, if I'm not mistaken. None of that happened.
None of it happened.
So here we are.
And, it's not fun to be up here recommending a tax rate increase. It's not fun for you to sit in the board seat and have to contemplate a tax rate increase. I would much rather stand up here and tell you, hey, the state legislature came through and they did what they were supposed to do, and they're fully funding public education. But that has not happened. And by state law, the way the funding formula is set out, this is one of our very few options to bring in revenue. And, we made some strategic decisions this year, moving into this budget year. Those are not long-term solutions, not all of them. Some of our staffing areas, and we did this through attrition. We did not do a RIF, but some of the areas that we have reduced our number of FTEs, those are not long-term solutions. Mm-hmm. Those were short-term solutions. This would present us with more of a long-term solution, and it's not a solution for years and years to come, but it does get us through the next few years until the state hopefully does do something or change the funding formula in a future legislative session. But I don't have much hope for this coming legislative session.
And you're not here sitting there saying, we need this tax increase to fund some future growth plan or strategic plan or vision that this district's articulated. No. You're sitting there saying that we need this tax increase because we lost our grant and we didn't get any new funding.
That's correct. I'm telling you that this was, regardless of any future plans, this tax rate increase is being recommended because of the way the school finance formula is set right now, and because of the inaction of our state legislature to fully fund public schools. And this has to do with the here and now. It has to do with next year. It has to do with the 24-25 school year. These are our options for now.
And the loss of the formula transition grant was no fault of this district's or our
Oh.
own. It's inaction of the legislators to find a solution to something they created.
That is correct. They used the term grant, but it was not a grant. It wasn't anything applied for. It was part of the funding formula. It was part of the funding due to us in the 2019 rewrite of the school funding formula. They just wrote it as a short-term issue for 5 years, and they felt like at the time that every district would work their way out of it, but not all of us did, and it was at no fault of our own. It's just the way the funding formula works.
Because we're rapid growth,
Yes,
right? We can't work our way out of rapid growth.
that's correct.
And one of the things I would ask, one of the things I've already done the math, is I went and looked and said, how much did my taxes, my property taxes, how much less did I pay last year because of that $18 billion property tax cut that they did give us? And it was substantial, the amount of taxes we would have paid under the old formula. This right here is not even asking, it's asking for just a portion of that. Like what you're asking, to raise my personal property taxes would be less than what
you saved.
What I saved.
And we do have those actual dollars on a slide for our order of election next, but it's about 41% of it.
Okay.
So it's about
That seems about
41% of the decrease.
Which, they told us over and over, have you asked?
Your community.
Have you asked your community to fully fund your local school district before you come and ask the state to fund it?
Right.
And
it's
our
not
answer is, and I remember I was like, and I didn't know. And I said, Liz, have we asked for all? And you go, no, we still have 7 pennies.
That's right. And it's not that the state doesn't have the money. It's that the state chooses not to spend the money that way.
Yes.
And they choose to tell us to ask our constituents to fund it.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve action item 11D.
Motion to approve.
Hold on.
Time out.
Why believe?
I gotta do it?
That is not Mr. Western.
I've got it.
Please.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $1.2869, which is effectively a 0.5% increase in the tax rate.
All right. Mr. Matthew Slayton, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Western, with the second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Okay. Based on that action, that indicates that we must call an election based on that adoption of that tax rate. So the election is a VADER, or as we would like to call it, a school funding election, because it is, you're electing to fund your schools. So a lot of these slides you've seen before, right? Some of you've seen already tonight. Just a reminder of what a voter-approved tax rate election is. It requires majority approval by the voters to increase the district's M&O rate. Again, it's based on inaction of our state legislature to fully fund Texas public schools. There's been no increase in the basic allotment since 2019, and it would raise around $2.5 million for Argyle schools. So here's a one-time payment, what it would fund, right? The one-time payment that we talked about of about $890,000, 2% midpoint pay increase that is ongoing year to year of $885,000. It would offset the remaining of the budget deficit from this year of about $400,000. And then going forward, it helped maintain classroom ratios in future years and future pay increases of about $325,000. Because that is where we're at without any type of action, is we are looking at future raises and we're looking at our classroom ratios. I'm just going to be really honest with you. So I know we talked about this in our budget workshops throughout the spring. We talked about there were a couple of things that we weren't willing to do this year but would be up for discussion without any changes in the future, and one of those was our class size ratios. We're trying to stay within the guidelines of the 22-to-1 through 4th grade, at least starting the school year, and the average class sizes in the secondaries as well. So those are some areas that it would help fund in the future. And if you want to look at, what is an average when we're budgeting for a teacher FTE, because you have to budget for not only the salary, but the benefits and all that as well, you're looking at about $68,000 is what we budget. So that kind of tells you about what that would cover, if you're looking at about that $325,000 there.
And when you're talking about class sizes, you know, when you look at a master schedule, Ms. Knowles could even explain this even better than I can, but you're gonna see some, like, you'll have an average class size, but then you're also gonna have some class sizes that are gonna be, you know, 28, 29, maybe 30, but you may have some that are 14, 15, 16. Well, that's all based on student interest and what students are involved in. So, for example, if you've got, you know, a brass section and a student has to be in that one period, then you're gonna have to put that student in an English section, and you may have more students like that, and that English section's gonna get bigger. You're going to have some of that, so your average is what we have to go by. But just because you have 29 or 30 in one room doesn't mean we're doing that everywhere. It's because our students are able, we're allowing them to be in the events that they want to be in and the classes they want to be in, and sometimes it gets high on one end and low on another. So would you explain that any differently? No. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just, you know, there's some things out there that people say, well, we've got over 30 kids in a classroom. Yeah, we may, but we also have 14 in one, but that's because the students in the 30 are choosing to be in some other things and their schedules get locked, and that there's no other option for them.
And
But
it's
that
not-
doesn't mean every class is.
And it's not us closing a section where there are 14
Correct.
students who want to participate in something.
Right.
Is it fair to also say that this Vader may also allow the district to replace or to hire some support staff?
We would hope to in the future.
That would also contribute to a higher job satisfaction and quality of life for teachers beyond just giving them a 2% raise.
Mm-hmm. I am sure Dr. Jordan could speak to the areas on the curriculum instruction side that could greatly benefit the teachers in the classroom, of what areas, and I'm not saying we have a job defined right this second, I'm just saying what areas of support they could have that would greatly increase their level of satisfaction in the classroom. There's some areas that we really had to reduce this year in the curriculum instruction area.
Right.
Not all teachers do it for money. In fact, I think a lot of them say, I don't do it for money, and they would like more support in the classroom.
And without specialists, all tier 1 and tier 2 instruction is in the classroom with the teacher. And so you lose, and even the tier 3, because without specialists, we don't even have, you know, you're not even being able to do some of your tier 3 section. All of that falls on the classroom teacher. And so we would absolutely want to build back our intervention supports on our campuses that we absorbed this year. Now, the beauty of that is we get to rebuild that and make sure it's consistent across our campuses. But at the same time, yes, a raise is nice, but teachers need their support as well. And we know that, and we hear that. Now, there's some of the things that we absorbed, like the technology class. That was part of the specials rotations. That's a different story, because your technology TEKs are being done, they're being done anyway in the classroom, because the students have their devices in the classroom, the STEM classes, those aren't necessarily the same kinds of supports. Their technology TEKs are just, that's happening organically in the classrooms, but those intervention teachers and those positions we had to absorb there for this year would definitely be probably the first things we would look at trying to get back into our campuses.
And so what you mean by that, because sometimes I didn't even understand. Basically an intervention teacher is one that goes and pulls a kid that needs some one-on-one direct attention in reading or math and pulls them out of the classroom and gives them the attention that they need.
Correct. Or could potentially push in and help in the classroom.
Yeah, and then whereas we've had to make those difficult decisions in this budget crisis to cut that. So now the teacher is not only having to teach all the other kids on level or whatever, the accelerated kids, but is actually having to do that type of interventionist teaching, which is hard.
It is.
It's another lesson plan, it's another, it's
And
another
it
group
detracts
they have
from
to work with.
the educational experience that we want our students to have.
Yeah.
To know their name and need.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, so look at some costs to taxpayers. So you look at what just happened in the 23-24 fiscal year, it was the 23 tax year. We had that little over 18.5-cent reduction. So per 100,000, that was a reduction of $185.40 per every 100,000 of taxable value. In 24, what you just approved was a 7.7 cent increase. It's $77 per $100,000 value. So if you look at our average taxable value, and this number is from the 24 year, our average taxable value is $588,147. To do the math on that, in 23 it was a decrease of a little over $1,000. In 24 we'd add back $452 for a net decrease still from the, if you go back all the way to the 22 year, you'd still have a net decrease of $637.55 on the average taxable value of a home in Argyle. Just again, we are not alone in this. There are many, many districts throughout the state that have either done a VADR, they have in a previous year, they've adopted one for this year just like us, or they are talking about doing it in the future. It's remains one of the only options school districts have to fund schools as costs continue to rise and per student funding has remained stagnant since 2019. So this action item is actually to adopt the order of election, which is required since we adopted the tax rate with the 7.7 pennies in there. So I believe go to back to the agenda. Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No.
It's just the adoption of considering and possible approval of an order calling a tax ratification election on November 5th, 2024.
11E.
So you're not very good at this, which is a good thing. You're not very good at calling these elections. You don't know how to do it.
I don't. This
Say that with
takes
pride.
that takes a lot of help for some other people. This is not. This would be
Well, you don't have a lot of experience in
this
That's a good thing.
I'm in my 28th year. This will be the third one I've done.
Okay.
So, no, not very much experience on that.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to consider and possible approval of an order calling a tax ratification election on November 5th, 2024.
I move that the board adopt an order calling a tax ratification election to be held on November 5th, 2024.
All right, Mr. Matthew Slayton, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ooh, Mr. Hawksworth with the second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
All right, thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
It's so close, Mrs. Ike.
Do you have the slides for that one? That's okay.
Mhm.
You do now. Coming your way. There you go. Okay, so we had a workshop last Monday, the 12th, and one of the items that came out of that workshop was to revise and look at the strategic growth and facilities plan. So just bringing to you tonight that revision. There was a minor revision to that. We did that on August 12th. No revisions to the continuous analysis piece. That is still in place. That is what the board expects the district to do, that we continue examining the growth. We continue looking at the outlook plan as needed, reviewing bonding capacity, district demographer, financial advisors, all of those things. We continue to do those. Also, the district takeaways that have not changed is that our final enrollment numbers with our demographer have not and do not change at this point. The variable is just when those enrollment numbers happen, so we continue to review those strategic growth and facility plan to make sure we adjust based on demographic data. The direction from the workshop last week was to revise that we will prepare and plan for multiple high schools as determined by demographers' projections, land acquisition, and capacities of facilities, continuing to keep the transition to 2 middle schools and 2 high schools in 26-27 and 27-28, so we're planning for those. And no changes to the elementary campus configuration, no changes to the middle school campus configurations, but adding the piece on the high school configurations to prepare and plan for multiple high schools as determined by demographer projection, land acquisition, and capacities of facilities. So really the next steps would be the board to consider adoption of the revised strategic and facilities growth plan. We will be collaborating with our demographer this fall to begin zoning for transition to 2 middles and 2 highs. And then we'll reconvene the bond and growth planning committee this fall in order to bring a bond recommendation back to the board for consideration.
One of the questions I have is, that high school, the current high school, I mean, from, I guess, the beginning of when it was initially planned and announced, it was always represented that it had a capacity of 1,750 kids.
That is my understanding, yes.
And basically, we're there. We're at
We are close.
1,660
Yes.
kids. Now, I think you with some
With our bond planning in the fall.
we did, and indications that there may be increased capacity as much as 21.
Regarding classrooms, yes.
Regarding classrooms.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that the common areas, the hallways, the cafeterias, the auditoriums are necessarily equipped to handle that capacity. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Because the architect that designed it, Corrigan, designed it and told us that it was 1750.
Right.
And that maybe there would be a future phase or a third connection there that may allow it to function better. And so we're we're at the 1750.
Right. The difference is that the electives classrooms were not considered as student capacity in that 1750. So it was dealing with just the core content classrooms, when essentially you have many other classrooms. I mean, a student in their schedule of the day, they're only going to be in 4 core content. They've got 3 more periods. They're somewhere else in the building. So to only say 1750 wasn't accounting for the second half of a student's schedule necessarily. But you're right, the commons areas, because that campus over there was always designed to have a third phase to it, which would have opened the flow in addition to the cafeteria.
But the cafeteria wasn't necessarily designed for 2100, was it?
I would have to go
Just
back
go
and
out
look.
into the courtyard.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, there
Can't
would
go
have
the
to
other
be, I'd
way.
have to go back and look at some of that. I mean, I wasn't here
I'm
for
just
that
kind
part,
of
but
curious if the hallways were designed for 2100, if the auditorium was designed for 2100. And I don't know,
I doubt
Ms.
it.
Knowles, you know. I mean, there's a lot of pinch points in that building.
Yes.
They all
Cafeteria is full.
Yes.
There's 3 lunches and
Right.
it's full.
right.
at 1650.
Yes. In the same way at 377, that campus had been added on to over time, and while there may be a classroom capacity of 1,300, that cafeteria area has not been adjusted even for that last edition.
Yeah.
So some of the same pinch points over there as far as serving in the commons areas. You're correct.
All right. I will entertain a motion to approve action item 11F as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Hawksworth, motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Mr. McDowell, second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. The time is 7:58 PM and we are adjourned.